Okay, I'm ready for real. Did you give me the thumbs up?
Oh yeah, it's going.
Oh, I'm sorry. Welcome back, everybody. This week we are on chapter 7. It is on performance assessment. This chapter is going to shift us from traditional assessments to performance tasks. So this is like where situations where students demonstrate learning by creating and creating a product or performing a skill instead of just selecting an answer. So students show how they what they can actually do. This is their time to shine. The chapter walks us through designing quality performance tasks, ensuring alignment and fairness and development, and strong scoring scores, including general rubrics that can be used across multiple assignments. So there are 6 different ones this time that we're going to discuss. Luckily, I only have one, and my other counterparts are going to double up on some of them. So I will be back to talk about the development general rubrics. So let's go ahead and kick this off with our first one.
Thank you, Selena. I have Learning Target 1. So, Learning Target 1 is all about planning a performance assessment. And honestly, this part feels kind of like behind the scenes a little bit, but it's probably the most important part. So, but before you even think about the task, the chapter really pushes us to ask ourselves, why are we assessing this? And we've seen this before, but who's using the results and what are they using them for? And just like we've heard it before, so it seems a little obvious now, but the chapter is really drilling it into us so that we don't skip this step. And then we jump straight into, oh, this would be a cool project instead of thinking about the purpose. And this is something that I do. I'm very bad about. I'm guilty. So, like, for example, like in my classroom, if I'm doing like a spline modeling performance task and I'm using that to guide instruction, or is it going in the gradebook? Because those are two very different levels of pressure. Is it formative? I don't need a huge sample size. If it's summative, I need enough evidence to feel confident in my judgment of their learning. So the chapter essentially walks through this assessment development cycle. So we've learned about the creation of these assessments, but now we're gonna dive a little bit more into their development cycle. So first you start with determining the purpose, and then you identify the learning targets, choosing the method in which you want your assessment to be, and figuring out how much evidence you need. So, the second step of clarifying the learning target really stuck with me because I'm very guilty about, oh, this would be a cool project, and not necessarily really realizing how well it'll relate to a standard or something like that. So, because if the learning target isn't crystal clear, the task won't measure what we think it's measuring. And that is Learning Target 1 was kind of a little bit of a review of what we've gone over, but to really drill it into our head. But there's also that pilot landing example that I really liked. You would certain you wouldn't certify a pilot based on one perfect landing on a sunny, perfect day. You'd want to see consistency under different conditions. So that idea of, as they call it, sampling, gathering enough varied evidence to make a fair decision. And that really applies in our classrooms because if a student models, like for me, a spline object well, that doesn't necessarily mean that they've mastered spline modeling. It could just be that they got it right that time. Um, so planning isn't just make a project, it's for us as teachers clarifying the purpose, being specific about the learning target, choosing the right method, and deciding how much evidence is enough to determine mastery. So if we skip those steps, we do risk making inaccurate judgments about student learning. So it's important to make sure we go through that. So to sum it up, essentially, Learning Target 1 really reminds us that strong performance assessment starts way before our task begins. And again, that's something we learned in previous chapters. And segueing into Learning Target 2, which is develop performance tasks. Okay, so once we've planned everything and clarified the purpose, Learning Target 2 shifts into actually developing the performance task. Um, and this is where it really gets into the nitty-gritty. So the chapter talks about how performance tasks have to like elicit the right kind of evidence and not just be busy work, not just a cool project, and the task essentially kind of like has to directly connect to the learning target. Um, and like I said, I'm pretty bad about, ooh, it's a cool project and not relating it very well. So, for example, the chapter talks about a performance assessment is a really strong match for reasoning targets or skill-based tasks. If I want to see how students think through modeling problems or apply spline techniques, watching them perform or evaluating their product makes sense. But if I just want to know whether they remember vocabulary terms, a performance task might not be the best choice. Because they can model something and not actually know what it means. So that was kind of like a reality check in a sense, because from this point up, I've almost kind of thought like if they can model it, they must know what it is. Um, but the chapter reminded me that that is not always true, and performance isn't always the best option. It's just the best option for certain types of targets. And like with me, with a very project heavy class, I went under the assumption that that kind of like was the assessment type. So, another thing that I really appreciated was the emphasis on fairness and clarity, because the chapter points out that performance assessments can be labor intensive and they take time to conduct and then score. So, we're really going to use them. So, if we're really going to use them, we need to be sure they align pretty directly and are worth the time for the students to produce as well as for us to grade. So that fairness and clarity really comes in there because if a student misunderstood the task, or what happens with me a lot, they run out of time, that does affect the results that we get as teachers. So we really need to make sure that things are illicitly stated, things are clear, the directions are straightforward, and our complexity is set per the student needs. And at the end of the day, that we do have realistic expectations of our students. Sometimes I think I expect more than what they're going to do. So that in my classroom is a big thing because if I ask students to create like a spline-based model, we're doing splines right now, I need to make sure I'm actually assessing the spline techniques, not their rendering settings or lighting skills, unless that's the target. So developing a performance style task really comes down to aligning it to those learning targets. So some questions that you could ask yourself is, does this task match the learning target? Will it give me observable evidence of mastery? Is it fair and manageable? So we can ask these questions to ourselves, and if we say yes to all of these questions and it's done well, our performance tasks won't just measure their learning, but it'll prove that they are learning. And that's what makes them a powerful tool, not always the best option, but when done correctly, they are very powerful. And for those of us in like CTE and project-based classes, they are big and hefty. They end up doing more for us than a classic multiple choice assessment. But one thing it did mention is keeping that variety, not going to just one style. So that was learning target 1 and 2. I'm going to pass it on to my teammate.
Thank you, Melissa. All right, so my name is Indy, and I had learning target 3, which is audit performance test for quality. When auditing, we're checking for 3 main criteria. We're looking for content of the task, feasibility and fairness, and the sample size. Sorry. So in my Adobe Visual, darn, in my Adobe Visual Design 1 class, most of what my students do is performance based, like Melissa. They're creating logos, digital posters, brand mock-ups, typography layouts. So the task itself is the assessment, but that's exactly why auditing it matters. The first thing I have to look at is alignment. If my learning target is understanding principles of design, like contrast, alignment, hierarchy, and balance, then my project has to actually require students to demonstrate those principles intentionally. If I assign create any poster you want project without clearly embedding those design principles in the task, then I can't really judge whether they've mastered them or not. I might just be grading creativity instead of their effort. Or sorry, creating grading their creativity or their effort. Feasibility and fairness is another big one in a design class. For example, if I assign a branding project that assumes students already understand marketing language or have access to outside resources, I could unintentionally disadvantage some students. Or if the project requires complex illustrator tools that haven't fully been practiced yet, then I'm not assessing design thinking. I'm assessing tool proficiency under pressure. I also have to think about sample size. One logo design might not give me enough evidence to say a student understands composition. Yeah, sorry. Maybe that design worked because the concept was simple, but if I see them apply hierarchy effectively across multiple projects like a social media graphic or a magazine layout or a flyer, then I could confidently say that they understand the principle. For me, auditing performance tasks in visual design is really about accuracy. I want to make sure I'm assessing visual communication, intentional design choices, and the application of principles, not just whether something looks good. Because in design, something can look polished but still lack strong structure. And if I'm not auditing my task carefully, I might reward aesthetics over understanding. So auditing isn't about just creativity of the classroom. It's about making sure the creativity is aligned to my real learning targets. All right. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to my group mate for learning target 4. Sorry, my section was kind of short on the main focus. But
That would be me. And just to piggyback off everybody, me, Melissa, Indy, we all have project-based classes. So our responses may be a little bit different from Michael's because he's the mathematician in the group. But a lot of us it's gonna reflect on, I think, like she said, project-based, because we're project-based classes. So my discussion question was develop general rubrics. Now I like this one. So when I think about developing general rubrics, what stands out? I cannot say that word. Rubrics. What stands out to me is clarity and ownership. So in my classroom, I use rubrics that clearly lay out expectations, and I structure them in a way that students can see exactly where they fall where they fall, whether they completed everything fully, partially, or not at all, or you just did the bare minimum. It's not just you got an 85, it's broken down to where you can see what level you reached. For example, one of my rubric students can earn full credit when they thoroughly explain and justify their ideas, partial credit if they identify but don't fully explain, and then no credit if they just give the basic information with no explanation. That gives them an opportunity to determine their own grade before I say anything. So that they don't even have to ask me, why did I get that? And I'm like, did you look at the rubric? And I like that because it gives them ownership and accountability. And I'm all about accountability in my class. To me, developing a general rubric means identifying the skills I consistently value across assignments. This is like clarity and reasoning, organization, and in-depth explanation, and then a professional presentation. So that's basically how my rubrics go. Um, those expectations don't change just because the topic, it just changes based on what the topic, what you're actually doing. You just have to incorporate it there. So instead of rewriting expectations every time students complete a proposal or presentation, I can just use the general rubric that evaluates those core skills over and over again. And this will actually drill into their mind of what is expected in the classroom. They know what to do. That consistency helps students recognize patterns in their work, and they start to see I'm strong in creativity, but maybe I need to strengthen my justification part, and they can start working on those things intentionally, like intentionally working on those things. What I believe about rubrics is that they should not be a surprise at the end. That's a guide for me. They should guide the work from the beginning. So you'll know what, lay it out, make a plan, outline it, you know what you're doing. If students can look at the rubric and almost predict their grade based on quality and their effort, then the rubric is doing its job. So for me, developing rubrics is not about creating transparency. I mean, it is about, sorry, it is about creating transparency, promoting self assessment, having them look into themselves. Okay, what did I do this time versus that time? And then helping students take ownership of their performance across the assignments and not just one project. And that's all I got for that one. If anybody want to chime in, if not, I send it on to Michael.
Right. So, building on what Selena just shared about developing rubrics, I need to move us on into the next two learning targets for this chapter. That'll be learning target 5, which is audit general rubrics for quality, and learning target 6, which is use performance assessment formatively with students. So, this section of the chapter really kind of wants to extend our thinking to go beyond just making a rubric and think about these two deeper questions of how do we know the rubric is actually high quality, and then how can we use our performance assessment in ways that actively support learning rather than just assigning a grade. So for learning target 5, audit general rubrics for quality. When I first started teaching, I assumed that if I just had a rubric to an assignment, that it's going to be clear just because it makes sense to me. It's going to make sense to them. And so if I had, categories and point values and whatnot, I felt pretty confident about that. And obviously this chapter lets me know that when I was a beginning teacher, that was very much wrong. But, auditing a rubric means stepping back and asking, does this rubric truly measure all the things I really care about? And one of the most important ideas here is alignment with learning targets. And so if the learning target emphasizes reasoning or conceptual understanding or explanation, but the rubric primarily rewards getting the correct answer, then there's a disconnect there. And in math, that distinction matters a lot. So like when I grade open response questions on tests, I always use a rubric-based approach where students earn points for demonstrating specific mathematical ideas. If they solved the equation correctly, but made a small arithmetic mistake during the process of solving, they would still get credit for their thinking, and their process. And to make that consistent, I shared that rubric with like my PLT, my professional learning team, when we graded common assessments, so that we would use the same criteria, so we were evaluating student work similarly. And that was important to me because in math, the work is often more important than the answer. The reasoning shows understanding. The answer alone doesn't always tell the whole story if they can understand what's going on or not. Because you can get lucky with the numbers. And that connects directly to the chapter's discussion about consistency and clarity. If two teachers score the same response very differently, that's not a student issue, that becomes a rubric issue. And so clear criteria help reduce that kind of subjectivity and improve the fairness. of your rubric. And the chapter also emphasizes examining the structure of a rubric. Are the criteria distinct or do they overlap? And are the performance levels clearly differentiated? And then there's the language. Instead of saying like excellent reasoning, a good explanation, the rubric should describe exactly what that looks like. Does the student justify all their steps, use mathematical properties, connect representations, that kind of stuff from a math perspective? When descriptors are specific, students can then improve because they can see what they need to improve. When they're really vague, students are left guessing. And so auditing a rubric is really about clarity, alignment, and fairness. And it's about ensuring that our grading practices reflect our instructional values. But even a strong rubric isn't enough. And that's where Learning Target 6 becomes critical, which is using performance assessments formatively with students. And this part of the chapter shifts the focus from grading to growth. Performance assessments shouldn't be just something we do to our students. It should be something we do with our students. Um, and a strategy the chapter emphasizes is giving students a clear vision of the learning target. So students need to understand what quality looks like before they can produce it for themselves. And this connects to something I experience regularly in my classroom, where during lessons, students would always ask, after I say, you gotta make sure your shirt work, they were like, well, how much work do I gotta show? Because they want to know what they gotta do to get credit. And at first glance, it seems like they were asking about like length. Um, and they are asking about like length and whatnot because kids are lazy and they don't do, they want to do more than they have to do. But more succinctly, they're asking about expectations. uh, those were the moments when I would explain to them how points were earned for demonstrating their mathematical processes, and I would show them that the rubric rewarded reasoning that be taking place when they took their assessment. So not just the final answer, because I wanted there to be no guessing about what full credit required. And as we continued throughout the units, I could reference that kind of grading structure with the students, and especially when they put work on the board. So if a student solved the problem but skipped some of the justification, I could remind them, remember you earn points for explaining your reasoning, not just getting the right answer. Um, so over time, students became more aware of what quality mathematical work looked like. And the rubric wasn't just something used at the end of the test, it shaped how they approached problems during the instruction. And so that to me is a formative use of performance assessment. Um, the chapter also talks about examples and models, showing strong and weak examples and having students analyze them. That process makes the criteria visible and helps students internalize their expectations. And so another powerful strategy is descriptive feedback during learning. Instead of writing, needs work, we can say your solution is correct, but your explanation doesn't justify why you chose that strategy. Again, for like math purposes. Um, and that kind of feedback gives direction. And then there's the self-assessment and revision. When students use the rubric to evaluate their own work and revise before a final grade, the rubric becomes a scaffold rather than a judgment. And so performing assessment without revision often feels final. But when revision is built in, assessment becomes part of the learning process itself. And so used formatively, rubrics clarify expectations, guide thinking, and support growth. Now, more of me as we get into the reflection. Because I'm going to keep on going. I got the first reflection question. So let's get into that. As I reflect on this chapter, the idea that stands out to me uh, is that rubrics communicate what we really value. Um, Students pay attention to what earns points. And so if we emphasize reasoning, they'll develop reasoning. If we emphasize surface things, they'll focus on those things instead. And for me, thinking about both grading open response math questions and responding to questions, students asking how much work to show reinforce this kind of idea. The structure of the rubric shaped how I read their work, and it shaped how they approach their thinking. So auditing and using the rubrics isn't just a technical task, it's a reflective task. It asks us to consider whether our assignments are aligned with our beliefs about what matters in learning. And so I'd love to hear from my CTE colleagues here. Have you ever adjusted how you graded something and noticed it just changed what students prioritized, or experienced a moment when expectations clear, um, making your expectation more clear shifted how students engage with their work?
All the time, daily. Daily. I have to tell them, like, because it's a project-based class, like I told them today, because it's the end of the quarter, and I realized we didn't have any quiz grades. So I broke up their project. I said the written part is going to count as a quiz, and the actual 3D hands-on will count as a project grade. So because they was just thinking, oh, I can just do the project. I'll take the 70. I don't have to do the 30. Yeah, that 30 is going to be a quiz grade. So that changed how they responded, because I don't give a lot of quizzes. I give a something that's going to involve like reflection on it that they have to written, I would count as a quiz. So I told them like the explanation part, the written part of you explaining your marketing segmentation and how you're going to market to this group and what incentives are you going to get them. And I gave them an outline. So all you got to do is fill it in. So that's the other thing too. Like, y'all, that's the other thing that bothers
They
me too.
can't
Like,
even do
everybody,
that.
thank you. Okay, so it's not just me. I'm like, what is
Not
the
just
problem?
you,
Like, all
everything.
you
I'm
have
with
to
you.
do is fill it in. I answered the question. I gave you the questions. Fill
Right.
it in.
I
Answer
give you
it.
the steps. You can check the box off, all of it.
Yes. So
And they still don't know what to do.
it's too much work.
Yep.
I'm not. It's about to be spring break.
Miss Crudup, that's too
Yeah.
much.
Yes. So, but yeah, I change it daily. So just they'll adjust, because when I see they're not engaged and they don't want to do it, all right, yeah, this counting as a quiz. Oh yeah, just daily classwork, because I don't put all the classwork in the grade book, because I'm not gonna do that. I don't feel like doing it. I just want to make sure that you are doing the work, like the guided notes and things of that nature.
Right. I remember I don't give a lot of projects, but every once in a while I give like there's this art project as ways to students creating functions to create a picture. And so I remember the first time I did it on my rubric, it's just talked about you gotta have 10 distinct lines that you kind of, you mark off your domain and range and whatnot. And I got these square figures, they're just like just horizontal vertical lines. I'm like, that's so weak. I was like, that was so weak. But it was my fault because I didn't make my thing explicit to be like, you need to have diagonal lines too. Like, why you have just all these square figures,
I feel
and you
bad.
have these little short
You
equations? Yeah, yeah, they
got to be
beat the system.
specific with them.
Yeah, they beat the system because like I wasn't specific in my rubric, and then the next job was like, oh nah, let me go ahead and give you exactly what I want. I want some of these oblique lines. I'm gonna tell you like you can only have two of the verticals, two horizontal ones. Like you got to have some curves in there, like all this kind of stuff because
And then you gotta
if I
ask
wasn't
them, do they
explicit,
understand? Then you gotta, once you break
Right.
it down like that, then you gotta ask them, do you understand?
oh
Do you
yeah,
have any questions? Because they still
mm-hmm.
like, no,
Oh, and
I
they
don't get
still
it.
won't tell you if they got a question.
Oh,
They'll
not
wait
till they
until you're
get
done. Can you come help me?
Then not just
Right.
ask.
Okay. And then sometimes when you have so I try to prioritize because North Carolina is now doing a thing where you have to take a computer science class in order to graduate. So I've started trying to incorporate like basic computer skills as like a priority thing to it. And one of those priorities is file naming conventions. So with every project, and it's pretty self-explanatory. It's the last name underscore essentially whatever the name of the project is. So right now it would be last name underscore spline underscore modeling. And even if they don't put the underscore between spline and modeling, and I had a girl message me, we're 4 weeks into the semester. I've been doing it from the very get-go. She's like, it is overkill to do 20 points for file naming. Well, you didn't name either one of the files correctly, and I gave you all of the shapes. All you had to do was download the file, click 3 buttons, name it, and submit.
I feel your pain so
That's
much.
too much work. And
I feel your
I
pain
got
so
computer
much.
science this year. Yeah, I taught that for the first time this semester. When I tell
Oh,
you I was at home YouTubing it up, trying to figure.
I'm the only computer science teacher we have at my school. So I
I
have to
don't
get
like
everybody.
code.org. We do code.org. I don't like it.
I
That's
see,
why I
but the
came up.
only
I have to do a lot of hands-on things because they get bored. So I have to
yeah,
do a lot of hands-on. That's how I ended up with the 3D model project, because I had to figure out something. But that's how they use that to like create a game room or like a computer room or something like that. But they had to identify all the different parts, like your network and your hardware, your software, stuff like that. So
all right.
yay, computer
Well,
science. Yay, North Carolina.
right. Because I'm teaching the basics of computer science in an Adobe class. Right. They don't even know how to go. They don't know how to file, save, nothing. I have
But
to
no,
teach
I'm
them all.
doing coding.
They don't
Ours
even
is
know
coding.
they don't
We're not
even
even
know to
doing that.
monitor the separate thing.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I'm glad to know I'm not the only one because they be stressing
Oh,
me out.
they can't even look. You can put it on Canvas and put an attachment. Like, well, how do I type on it? Download it into a
I
Google
can put
Docs.
a
Just click
video
on
and
it.
they still don't know what to do. And I do. I put videos with every assignment. Miss
We
Crudup,
in
I don't
trouble,
understand.
y'all. If this the generation that's gonna take care of us, we are in trouble.
I don't even know.
Fun times, fun times. But that's the end of my long spiel of stuff. I'm gonna get,
I think I might be the next one.
yeah, I'm going to pass it on to Indy to talk about the alignments of things.
Yeah. Okay. So I have how does this chapter align with or challenge your own beliefs about teaching and learning? So after reading chapter 7, it really affirmed a lot of what I already believe about teaching and learning, especially in a performance-based class like Adobe Visual Design. I've always believed that students learn best by doing, and this chapter reinforces that performance assessment allows us to see learning in its truest form. In design, I can't measure understanding of contrast, hierarchy, or alignment through a multiple choice quiz. No, I really can't. I've tried, but I can't. I have to see it applied. When students create a logo, a poster, or a brand mock-up, that's where their thinking becomes visible. The chapter's emphasis on asking students to execute a performance or create a product aligns perfectly with how I view authentic learning in a creative classroom. At the same time, the chapter challenged me to be more intentional about alignment. Sometimes in a design class, it's easy to get caught up in get caught up in creativity and engagement, which I value deeply. But this chapter pushed me to ask, is this project truly aligned to the specific learning target? For example, if I assign a social media campaign project, which I do a lot, am I really assessing students' understanding of layout and typography, hierarchy, or am I unintentionally grading aesthetic appeal and effort? I have made that mistake in the past. The idea that tasks must elicit clear evidence of the intended learning target maybe reflect on how tightly my project directions and rubrics connect to the principles I'm teaching. The discussion about feasibility and fairness also resonated with me. In a design classroom, access to resources, prior exposure to technology, like we were just talking about, and confidence with software tools can all influence performance. The chapter reminded me that if a task is too heavily dependent on advanced tool knowledge we haven't mastered yet, then I'm not assessing design thinking. I'm assessing technical fluency. That distinction really matters. It challenged me to think more critically about scaffolding and whether my assignments truly allow every student to demonstrate their understanding of visual communication. Ultimately, this chapter reinforced my belief that learning should be authentic, applied, and reflective, but it also pushed me to refine how I design and evaluate those authentic experiences. It affirmed that creativity and structure are not opposites. In fact, clear targets, well-designed tasks, and strong rubrics, Lord, actually support creativity because students understand what quality looks like. In a course like Adobe Visual Design, that clarity doesn't limit students; it empowers them. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to my fellow group mate for the next critical thinking question.
that would be me. So I had which strategy or idea from this chapter would you feel most confident implementing and why? Um, this one was actually a little bit hard because it means I have to choose one thing. But because this chapter kind of related a lot to my project-based class. Um, but I think the one thing that I feel most confident implementing that I haven't done so already with project-based measurement is a generic rubric. I do have things on my rubric that are the same each time, such as like the naming convention that I talked about. Um, but I think it would be interesting to try to develop a generic rubric that can then have different wording changed. So something like with a polygon modeling, you use three tools, maybe always saying like three tools or something like that that need to be used within your model. but just incorporating more of those consistent elements to help students. So I think that's what I'm looking forward to implementing most. Mine's pretty short because, I mean, I do a lot of rubrics, I do a lot of performance-based assessment, so I kind of already implement those. So the only thing I don't really implement, I guess, would be that generic consistency within each rubric. What about you guys? Is there something in here for your project-based classes that you guys would implement?
I think we pretty much based on project. I don't know how y'all's are set up, but for me, that's like part of. Well, let me not start into mine just in case somebody else want to respond to that.
I mean, I'm pretty much using the things they've told us to use, like the rubrics. I pretty much apply. I'm not gonna say apply. I include rubrics on majority of my assignments. Um, but could I be more?
Consistent.
Yeah, trying to think of it. Yeah, I could be more consistent. I'll say that.
I get it. I understand that. Same here. Well, I mean, I do for the most part for major projects, but like just like daily with stuff that I don't. So I can understand that. So my reflection was, what part of this chapter makes you feel uncertain, nervous, or hesitant about applying in practice? Honestly, after reading the chapter, I don't feel nervous about using performance assessments because I already use them regularly in my project-based classroom. Oh, excuse me. The one area I always think about carefully is like the fairness in group work. The chapter kind of emphasized making sure we're accurately measuring individual learning, especially when its performance tasks are collaborative. So that's like meaning in group. And that's something I'm very intentional about. So when my students are working in groups, I'm constantly walking around in the room. Okay, so what are you doing? What's your part? Why are you just sitting here? You shouldn't even be on your phone. Do I need to take your phone? That's me. Like right now, we're doing those 3D projects. So watching who's leading for one, watch who's contributing the most ideas, who's explaining the concepts, and who's disengaged. I don't wait till the final presentation to determine grades. I let them know right. I even let them know in the moment. Okay, so your participation grade is not going to be good because what part did you do? I didn't see you do anything. I let them know I don't see you doing anything, so you're not getting a grade for that part. And then that's when, oh, I painted this, I did that. So that's where that comes in. They want to explain what they're doing. um so because of that, I do individualized participation grades when it comes to their projects. So overall, let's just say one person might have got a 95, where another person might get an 80 based on their class participation in that project. So if one student did majority of the reasoning, the explanation, and development, that shows. If another student contributed less, that also shows. My grading reflects on what I observe when they're doing it, not just the final project. So I wouldn't say I'm hesitant, but I'm more aware that performance assessments requires presence. You can't assign one group grade and assume it accurately represents every student in their understanding. It requires attention, observation, and intentional grading, but that's actually something I value in my classroom. I enjoy seeing learning happening in real time. I enjoy being part of the process too. I actually get in there and help. I tell them when they asking how I don't know how to build this, or like I said, we're doing these stadium projects right now. They have no imagination. I tell them, it's like, well, Miss Galloway, how you come up with that idea? I said, because I came up in a generation that we had to use our imagination. Did y'all watch Barney? Like, come on, you. So my reflection is less about uncertainty and more about responsibility. And I get in there and I'll model what I like. Here, you can try this, or I give them ideas to jog their imagination, because they really, it's kind of weird because they really don't have an imagination. Like, I was like, if anything, Google do it yourself 3D models and see what it looks like and see if you can kind of, reflect that or try to mimic that. Like, they have no ideas. And then I give them something. Oh, yeah, that's T, Miss Galloway. That's T, Miss G. Yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. Oh, and then so it jogs their, you know, imagination, because they really has none. That's why I like doing hands-on things and making them be creative, because this generation really don't have an imagination. Like, I sit back and be like, wow, like not to be funny, your childhood sucks. Like y'all don't do anything, not like that, but we had fun. I had to have imagination. So, but that's how I feel about my reflection question. And next,
That's real though. The
yeah,
childhood does suck because everything's given to them so much. Like there's so much knowledge, just like all the ideas and stuff are just pumped into you all the time. You don't gotta just go outside and have just make up fun. Go have fun. Go do something that's fun. Whether you're in the house, out the house, don't matter. Just make it up by yourself. And so I think, I think it's an accurate statement that the child is different than us, where we couldn't rely on somebody entertaining us all day long. We had to come with it ourselves. And that forces imagination. And
yeah,
so
make them
these
use
things
their
just
brain.
yeah.
And another thing, like we can't just be oblivious to the fact that these kids are using all these AI and chat GPT and everything to answer their questions. So this is how I get at them. I'd be like, okay, I can tell when you use chat GPT. I can tell when you use AI because it don't sound like you for one. And for two, use it as a tool. If you're gonna use it, because I know you're gonna do it anyway, use it as a tool. And then I need you to give it to me in your words. I don't care if you don't think it sound right, but I know how you talk. I know how you write. Don't try to play me. So
Do y'all ever like include in any of your projects like a space for them to say, this is how I intend to use AI, or this is how I'm gonna, or how I did use AI? Like put it out front, but like I know you're gonna do it. I want you to write in here what you're doing with it. To give that more like, I guess, credence to their thought, the thought process they're
So
using.
yeah, our county wants us to start doing that. So there are
Mhm.
some teachers that do it. I probably should because I know that they will use AI in my class, even though they think I can't tell if they made something in Illustrator or not. But yeah, our county is making it to where if you're allowing AI in your class, you have to put it somewhere in your assignment for a student to put like what level of AI they use.
Mhm.
oh no, I don't do it, but I might incorporate it because I just tell them up front, I know you're using it. Like I already know. And then I tell them at the beginning, if you use AI and you use it directly like it does, you're getting a zero or you're getting a, well, we can't really give zeros, my county suck, but I'm giving a 50. You're getting a 50. You're not getting credit for it. And I put in the notes, this is 90% AI.
I'm pretty lucky. My software has no AI features, but it's funny how they still attempt to use AI because they'll like use AI to create an idea, but then they like jury rig it, and it's like, hmm, interesting. Because what they'll do is they'll ask AI to tell them how to make it, and I'm like, you do realize AI doesn't actually know how to use a 3D modeling software, right? But okay, because then they'll ask me, they'll literally, and Wake County is pretty lucky now, I guess. All the AIs are blocked. They're like all blocked, except for Magic School.
Yeah,
Um,
that's Franklin County too.
and so Magic School really doesn't know 3D modeling to save its life. It thinks you want actual like 3D shapes. Um, so it's kind of funny because they get to my class and they realize I can't cheat if I wanted to. But they'll pull up the AI, ask that AI to tell them how to do it, and then they'll point to the AI and be like, Miss Heath, I don't know where that tool is. Well, that's because that tool doesn't exist.
Don't do it.
Well, that's good. They can't use it in yours. I wish they couldn't use it in mine.
I struggle most with the lack of imagination because they have to imagine things before they can make it in the 3D software. Like even something so simple as like just the plain school chairs. They can't think about it in that way. So one way that I've combated that is at the beginning of like a creative project. Um, I do phone basket circle time is what I call it. We're not really in a circle, but they put all of their phones in the baskets. Um, I am really sneaky and petty, and so I log into all of the desktops and lock them. Because you can log in and then just lock the screen, and it can only be unlocked with your password. So then they are technologyless and they are trapped to colored pencils, markers, Poscas, the whiteboard. I tell them I don't care what you use, but no technology was going to help you. And believe it or not, it has really made a difference. I will say they're starting to be able to create those ideas and they're using that paper to draw things out. So, and they actually enjoy it at this point, which is kind of ironic. Like they know we're starting a new project and they're ready to give up their phones. They're ready for the no screen time. It's kind of like I was really shocked the other day about it.
Oh, well, good job on that. I have to threaten mine. I know one semester, last semester, they were so bad with it, they couldn't get in my classroom without giving me, I stood at the door without giving me their phones. Either give me your phone or take this tardy or take this absence, and you know your mama gonna be getting that phone call about you not being in this class. You cannot come in my classroom without giving me your phone. So I haven't had to do it this semester, but I did last semester.
The new cell phone policies are definitely helping.
Well, we have to be consistent across everybody in my school. Everybody's in my school is not consistent, so that's why it's kind of hard.
Mm.
But don't tell my principal that.
Yeah. I mean, I am strict, but I'm also not super, super strict when it comes to certain things. Like if we're working on a project for 3 days and you want to listen to some music, I'm kind of like, eh. But if I'm talking, they know. I see that phone is mine. And I tell them all the time, I'm a technology hoarder. Like, I will gladly take your phone,
I was
add it to
about
my
to say I'm
collection.
probably that teacher that y'all will hate then because I sure let them have their phone. But it's mostly like as long as you have it away when I'm lecturing, you can have it
Right.
when you're doing the something because mine is most like creativity, and I'm one of those people. I use music when I work, so I
These kids
listen to
can't
it.
work without music. That's what I did learn. They cannot function
Yeah,
without
that's
the
me too.
noise for some reason. I had a student
Discovered
today who was just about to go crazy because his phone was broke and he didn't have no hands. He said, "Can you please turn on some music while we do it?" Like he asked me 50, 11 times to the point I was just like, you know what? Cut my parental bill. I don't go to YouTube. I don't even care because you're getting on my nerves right
I
now.
just started cutting what I cut on my Apple Music. Well, I signed
Yeah.
into my Apple Music, and I just cut the radio on, cut the hits on.
Yeah.
They don't mess with me.
So it worked. It actually worked. They actually what they say locked in. So
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah, they like it because they like us. That well, I ain't gonna say they like us, but they don't like quiet. So
Right. Okay, well, as we wrap up chapter 7, I think the key takeaway is that performance assessment allows students to demonstrate learning and meaningful. I cannot talk tonight. I know what I want to say, but I cannot talk. And learning in meaningful and authentic ways. But with that comes the responsibility to design clear tasks. Use strong rubrics and ensure fairness, especially in a collaborative setting. When we do this intentionally, performance assessments promotes deeper understanding, ownership, and growth. So thank you for listening to us. We look forward to hearing how others are thinking about this, and we'll see y'all next week for the next chapter 8. And we're out of here.